Alrighty, so the first thing we're going to do is I would like for our peer facilitators to introduce themselves, and then I would like for our panelists to introduce themselves with their name and their current job titles, and then I will let the peer facilitators take it from there.
Hello, I'll start. My name is Hattie. I'm a peer facilitator. I'm a senior. I'm on the philosophy and cognition track, and I also have an environment minor.
Jill, I can go. I'm Ethan. I'm a junior on the decision track. I'm double majoring in psychology as well, and I'm a minor in UX design too.
Hi, I'm Jill Charbonneau. I'm majoring in cognitive science on the philosophy and cognition track, and I'm also double majoring in sociology with a focus on law, justice, and social change.
Now we will roll on to our alumni. Whoever would like to start. If anyone wants to be number one, and then we'll just popcorn from there.
Yeah, I can go first. Hi, I'm Tyree. My current job title is a learning engineer. I work at Carnegie Learning in Pittsburgh, and back in the day, I was a computation track. And I will popcorn to Faye.
Hi, my name is Faye. I just graduated in the spring, class of 22, and I was a decision track major. It was the only major or minor I did, and I'm currently my official title is product integration analyst, but I work for a software company on the product team. Okay, I will hand it over to Logan.
Hello, I'm Logan. I did the philosophy track, and my current job title is user experience researcher. I work at a company called TCG Player. We work in the collectible space. It's now an eBay company. Who's left? I don't want to call someone who's.
Yeah, I can.
Laura. Oh, who? Emma.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Sorry, Lauren. My name is Emma. I graduated in 2018. I did the decision track and I was in the business school as well. And now I'm a marketing manager at LinkedIn.
Hey everyone, I'm Lauren. I graduated in 2017 in the decision track. I also studied organizational studies. And I'm currently a student pursuing my Master of Theological Studies at Harvard Divinity School. Pass to Madison.
Hi all, I'm Madison. I graduated in 2016 on the philosophy track. Did my master's in clinical mental health, and I'm now a licensed therapist. And I'll popcorn to Kelly.
I think that's me. Hi, I'm Kelly. I graduated in 2019. I was a double major in cognitive science and romance languages, and I was on the language and cognition track, if you hadn't guessed. I'm currently a graduate student. I'm finishing up my master's this spring and starting my PhD in the fall at University of Utah in psycholinguistics. I think that's it.
Okay, have we covered everyone's intro, I believe?
Hello,
one more. Go ahead.
Hi everyone, my name is Sida. I graduated last year May. I double major in cognitive science with the computation track, and I do a computer science major with LSA. I was working as a software development engineer with Amazon, and last year I being impacted by the layoff, so I'm looking for like a new role at the moment. Yeah.
Okay, now I think we've covered everyone. So should we move on to the questions? I will start with a question. We have a few different categories. This one is from CogSci and career exploration. So we're kind of going to start with a little timeline of like your time at school, and then move on to your time in the job field. So our first question is, did you all initially choose cognitive science as a major or have a clear idea of the career you wanted to pursue? If not, how did you settle on cognitive science and what is your current career path?
I can start. I was really interested in sort of the intersection of language and cognition starting. Oh, okay, good. No more feedback. I was really interested in it starting in high school because I was taking Spanish and French courses, and I was intrigued by the way they kept mixing when I didn't want them to. So I remember being at orientation, freshman orientation at Michigan, and I was all set looking at all these awesome classes. And I was like, well, they have a psychology major, they have a linguistics major, but they also have this choose your own adventure path where you get to make your own major and cobble it together. And so I remember telling one of the like counselors there, a peer counselor, and she was like, have you considered cognitive science? And I'd never heard the phrase before. She was, yeah, it's really new. There are like 4 of them, but it sounds like something you might be interested in. And so I looked into it. I was like, this is exactly what I was looking for. These are all the classes I wanted to take. And so once we had gotten right past the midterm in Cog Sci 200 and the earliest chance I could, I signed up and haven't looked back.
Yeah, I can go. So I have a similar story. So I always knew that I wanted to do cognitive science. I actually went to Michigan because they were like, at the time at least, they were one of the few schools that had a cog sci major. And I originally was really interested in languages, and like you said, like took multiple languages. They were always mixing, and like I was really interested in, you know, the way the brain processes language and language acquisition and all that stuff. So the first 2 years that I was in the cog sci major, I was on the language track. And then kind of halfway through switched to computation, which I think is covered by one of the later questions. So I can talk about that later, but yeah.
Yeah, I can go next. I think my experience will be like a little bit different because I start with the computer science at first, and then I realized machine learning and artificial intelligence is like very intriguing, and they're more like relates to linguistics, psychology, and philosophy for sure, because there are also moral question exists in the artificial intelligence. So I explore more that, figure that I can take psychology class, philosophy class, and that I can also count my computer science class towards computation track, which I think is really cool. So I just take the other classes on the side, and as well as doing like computer science major. And I never regret like taking cognitive science. I think it's like a really cool major and really makes me feel like enlarge like my knowledge like a lot. Yeah.
Okay. If no one else has any additional thoughts, we can kind of move on. Again, kind of staying in the career and exploration state or kind of stage. For those of you, obviously, you know, you guys have kind of found your career field, but we're wondering like what career fields has this major allowed you access to, and kind of like how have you gone about finding those fields from the cognitive science major?
I can start. So I just went through the process of looking for a job last winter and spring before I graduated. And I think that cognitive science, as we all know, is kind of newer to a lot of people. But I was seeing more and more as I was applying to jobs that cognitive science is now being listed as a desired major for all sorts of positions, particularly things that had to do with research or understanding people. That's kind of vague, but and you know, even everything from human resources to, you know, user experience design to marketing research, you know, things to do with understanding psychology. So yeah, that's kind of what I saw. I also found just that because the major was so interdisciplinary and because I was able to touch so many different academic disciplines, I was kind of able to use that as a selling point for myself to say, hey, like I've had these experiences taking these sorts of courses where I've learned these skills. because often when people just read, oh, cognitive science, they don't assume a lot of the courses that we all took. So yeah.
Awesome. Do we have any? Oh,
I did the research route. I was in 2 labs as an undergrad. I'm still working in one of the labs after graduating. I started applying to jobs and got one really quick, and it was in research, and I moved to San Diego and was working as a lab manager there. And then I went into grad school where I'm still doing research, and I really like research, and I'm going to keep doing research as long as they'll let me.
Yes, I followed a similar path there where I really enjoyed research and I did the lab manager thing. And then afterwards, I essentially just searched by virtue of method. So if I was really into surveys, I just searched for positions, and I was able to get into positions and jobs where they were just looking for people who were able to synthesize data in certain ways or take perspectives from different fields. And so it just kind of came down to that.
I can speak a bit to my career path. I knew before undergrad that I loved the idea of going into mental health as a field, and then taking the cognitive science program was so interdisciplinary. I just combined that with my desire to have like a service job, and I find it really rewarding to be able to like share all of the teachings from this field with people and let them implement it in their lives and use it to better themselves.
nice. Awesome. So we spent some time kind of talking about our studies and what led us to where we are. But let's take a step back. And if we could go back in time and add any minor, what do you think would help like boost up your cognitive science degree in your current career right now?
Computer science. Even though I did the computation track and like, you know, essentially got a minor in computer science because of all the courses that are required for that track, I think it still would have been good to like have an actual minor in CS and feel more comfortable doing like the actual hands-on part of like coding rather than just like knowing how it works.
Yeah, I definitely second that. Also, any kind of data science or statistics or basically any more hard skill. I know that I think there's a newer minor to do with like quantitative research methodology, anything kind of like that that would enhance kind of your technical know-how.
As a person that actually double major in computer science, I want to say that I feel like doing computer science definitely increase like coding skills, and it will definitely like very helpful to apply for a job as a software development engineer, or maybe it will be helpful in research. But I would say for me, if I could choose, I'll probably do like more like political science or international relations, just to kind of broaden my horizon and learn more about like the like in the literature side, because I feel like computer science teach you a lot in school, but it's kind of also kind of different from like what you're gonna do at practice, like in the industry level or in like research, I would guess.
Yeah, and just to add on, any of these sort of really intense sorts of skills that take some time to develop and, you know, make you feel more comfortable in using, there really is no time like the present. You're never going to have as much free time as you do in college. And I know that sounds wild if you're in college right now, but you have so many other responsibilities that you kind of get to put on hold most of the time if you're in undergrad. So all those things that you think you're going to learn, and you know, you'll spend a weekend or a week, you know, doing online classes for at your own pace. In my experience, that doesn't seem to happen because I never seem to have the time for it. So having some sort of structure and someone who's there paid to help you out, and you have that incentive of getting a good grade in your class, it's a really unique opportunity, and I would really recommend taking advantage of that while you have the chance.
I would add, probably at the risk of seeming a bit broad or even cliche, ask yourself what you love without necessarily thinking like, oh, I need this thing to get a better job. And the reason I say that is that there is nothing that beats the love you have for a topic, and that really shines through when you're speaking to someone in an interview. All of the professional roles that I had in between undergrad and grad school, the best parts of them were the opportunities I created for myself, which didn't always fit neatly into the role that I was hired for. So just really investing in those things that you love. For me, that was like religion and interreligious dialogue. Michigan doesn't have a religion department. They have religion courses within the history department. So maybe it would have been history for me. So I'll say that. And then I also would add that I think that nothing really beats the power of an interdisciplinary education. You really are entering the job market or maybe going to grad school with a skill set that you almost can't even describe. It's just a way of thinking and a way of approaching the world. And it's practical because the world is interdisciplinary and multiple actors are working together from different angles. And yeah, so, and both of my majors in undergrad, Cog Sci and organizational studies, were interdisciplinary. So that was really helpful for me. And I think the more that you can sort of like weave in those fiery passions you have and the opportunities you have to really build that robust life, the better you are.
Thank you all for those answers. Those are really valuable. I totally echo the final answer and that I got my environment minor like most recently as a junior after being inspired by like a behavior and psychology class, and it really like pushed me to look more into that intersection because I always have loved the environment, but I was like, how can I actually make an impact and make a difference using what I know I love to learn about and stuff like that. So that's really cool to hear from all of you. And so now we're going to be moving on to the CogSci and professional development section. So we were talking about how CogSci is really interdisciplinary. It might be difficult sometimes to identify what roles to specifically apply for. So we're wondering, how all did you navigate post-grad job search and find roles that you were qualified for that maybe were a little bit different than like your typical researcher or like a entry-level data analyst? Like, can you talk about how you went about looking for the roles that you qualified for with your skills? And also, to add on to that, what specific skills complemented your search?
Yeah, I can start because I think my career search was a little bit non-traditional outside of the cognitive science department. I was kind of like, to Lauren's advice, my cognitive science major was like my passion area and not necessarily like the function that I knew I was going into. So I knew I wanted to go into marketing and like somewhere within business, but for me, the cognitive science like skills per se was more of like a mindset that I marketed myself bringing to my job. Like the cognitive science education teaches you to be really like empathetic and very curious about human behavior and decision making. So that those were things that weren't necessarily on like job applications, but when I got to the stage of interviewing and like pitching myself, even in a cover letter, I would like lead with my cognitive science education and say I am a marketer who is like very curious and excited about decision making, which typically got in the interview, people wouldn't know even what cognitive science was, probably because this is the business world, and that would like spark a lot of conversation. So I guess my takeaway from that is like, even if you're applying for jobs where cognitive science skills or background isn't on the like list of skills, I think it's a cool icing on the cake sort of thing that you can tell about yourself that helps an interviewer understand like who you are and the way that you think.
Yeah, I completely second that. And I would also say that, you know, using all the resources available to you at Michigan while you have them is really important. Like I actually found my job through Handshake, which is like the university's job posting board. So I would say definitely ask around about stuff like that. Yeah, and I really think what Emma said is true, that it is a mindset. And I've found that through job interviews, people seem to be really interested in and impressed by this idea of cognitive science. Kind of, it's such a developing field. Like it's very implicit in the major that we're learning new things about the brain, about the mind, about human psychology all of the time, which is not necessarily an academic perspective that other students in different majors have. You know, like for some, there might be this idea that we already know everything there is to know about X, you know, but I think so integral to cognitive science is we know that there's so much we don't know and that we're still trying to figure out. And that's a really invaluable skill to have in no matter what you do for work. You know, this idea that you're always accepting that there are going to be things that I don't know, and I would like to learn those things.
Yeah, I definitely second that, and wanted to speak to like the using Michigan while you still have it. In that, so my career path has mainly been along research route, and so I was like always involved in some kind of independent study or like part-time research job while I was an undergrad, and through that, and also through the honors program, I was able to present at one of the CogSci colloquiums my senior year. And I had already been applying to jobs on LinkedIn, like 5 jobs a day, just like sending my resume out everywhere and like anything research related, anything to do with cognitive science, and it was not getting any replies back. And then I presented at that colloquium, and someone came up to me afterwards and he was like, hey, like everything you just talked about is exactly what we're doing at our company, and you should come work for us. And so the same thing happened when I came out of my master's program recently. Like I've never really had much luck with like applying on LinkedIn or applying on Handshake. And it's always just like random encounters with people I meet. Like for my current job, it's like some guy who was like the founder of this company came and talked to our class. And I like emailed him afterwards just asking for a job, and he's like, sure. So really leveraging your network and leveraging all those opportunities while you're still in school and you're like in that environment can be really beneficial.
And I've taken more of the academic and research route, but I think there's still something to be said about preparing for those sorts of interviews. And I'm usually upfront about it. If I'm interviewing for any sort of position, I'll say outright, I'm a hard sell, right? I have this background, and it's not strictly linguistics and it's not strictly psychology. So if you're looking for someone who's been trained only in that tradition, I'm not the person you want. But if you want someone who can think really creatively, who has experience in so many different subfields and can make these connections that other people can't, and can actually, help us bring move the field forward by making these connections and seeing places that fit together that someone who only has psychology, only has linguistics wouldn't, then you want me on your team. And I found that that's a really effective way of framing it, because you will run into people who, again, don't know what cognitive science is, which I think is a pretty common theme that people are talking about, but also don't understand sort of the benefit of having this really holistic interdisciplinary approach to these questions that are relevant to so many different fields. So I think being really upfront about that, and showing the strengths of cognitive science and your liberal arts education from Michigan is the best thing you can do, and really show them how you're everything they're looking for and more, and that you will be a more unique and a better candidate than people who only have training in one area or another.
I want to echo what Kelly and Emma said about like the fact that it's interdisciplinary, use that as an advantage. And also, I think one of the big takeaways of my career search was to think about the day-to-day type of job you'd like. I know that's not super common job search advice, but thinking about and considering, do you want to work alone? Do you want to work on a team? Do you want to work with the public? These considerations are really critical to finding a job that's sustainable for you in the long term, in addition to like the field and the title that you're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone had really great points about like the ways in which they apply cognitive science. I think as peer facilitators, we often, have to give the same pitch to students who are considering the major. So it's always interesting to hear how people decide to kind of pitch the major. And kind of like going off that last point where we want to know kind of specifically like what aspects, and this is geared towards those of you who aren't working in grad school or kind of post-grad things, but for those of you in kind of more corporate positions, we want to know like what aspects of working your job did you not expect or know about before graduating?
One thing that was kind of surprising to me is the culture of like extracurriculars in college also applies at work. And maybe this is just like at the companies that I've worked in or in tech, but I think Lauren mentioned too the idea that a lot of what you end up doing in your job is like what you create for yourself outside of your job description. And even like if you just follow your job description to a T, sometimes that's not really good enough for performing well. And so I think I had this feeling in college, like, oh, these classes are going to be really tough, but once I get into my actual job, I'll like be done at 5 p.m. and then have so much time. And I think there are companies out there that are just as rigorous as Michigan is in terms of like the people are really smart and intellectually curious, and they're going to like want to do things on top of their day-to-day jobs, which is sometimes a great thing and makes work really fun. And then other times like leads to hours that are tough or like boundaries that are tough between work and life. So I think that was one surprise for me, that like the intensity of like the Michigan academia can kind of bleed over into the real world of like corporate work too.
Yeah, there's a lot that I could say about just like the transition into working life. But kind of just to go off of that point that Emma raised about creating opportunities. I'm in school now, but I did work for 5 years in different nonprofits. Not a single one of my titles had the phrase learning and development in it. And yet I built a career that was based on company learning and development priorities. And that came from asking for opportunities and sharing what I was interested in. So I think the biggest lesson, and again, probably cliche, but it's like, you're not going to get anything if you don't ask for it. And the answer is not always going to be yes. And I have had my fair share of moments where I've been disappointed in the workplace. But one thing that has always made a difference for me is finding a boss or a mentor even. It doesn't have to be the person you're directly reporting to, who really believes in you and sees your potential, and someone who is willing and interested in raising your interests to people who are the decision makers. That's how I had the opportunity to plan company retreats for every place that I worked at, starting when I was like 22, which was a lot of responsibility to give me as an early career professional. But then I was able to like build that up over time and gain people's trust and gain my own skills and experience. And now I'm in a place where like that might actually be the career that I do long term. And that's just really exciting to me. And I hope that everyone on this call has the chance to sort of craft something that really enlivens them.
Yeah, building off of that, my first job right out of undergrad, I just started out as like an intern. And after like a few months of being an intern at this company, I had a really, really great mentor. So seconding the need for a great mentor who really wants you to succeed. And I went to her after when my internship was almost up, and it was like, nobody else wants to hire me. So, and she was like, oh no, I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out for you. I'll get you a job title. And they just like created one, because I would like during the internship, I was able to ask for things and able to really show my value to the company in like so many different kinds of ways, because again, interdisciplinary, right? We fit into so many different little pockets in the corporate world that's really like a huge asset to a lot of companies, and they will recognize that.
Awesome. So if we don't have anything else there, let's move on and let's kind of go back to a little bit about our degrees. What has been like the most rewarding part of your cognitive science degree in your career as it is now? Sorry, hard question.
I'm gonna echo what I said earlier. It's really cool to look at the same questions from different angles. And I feel like that set me up so well. Like for my master's thesis, I'm finding, in social psychology and in cognitive psychology and in linguistics, everyone's trying to do the same thing, but they use different words for it. And no one's kind of brought that kind of stuff together. So thinking back, is really cool to take classes on second language acquisition in psychology, in linguistics, in the Spanish department, and see how those, that instruction changed and how the same topic was taught by different people who had different perspectives. And, beyond sort of the degree and in my capacities, in research and in academia, it's been really cool to sort of share that with newer people who are just getting as excited about language and cognition as I am. And get to share that with my students, get to share that with my mentees, my RAs in the lab. So it's been really rewarding to be able to have that sort of creative outlook and share that with other people. So then even if they're not doing a cognitive science degree, they can have that, that trick up their sleeve where they don't feel too confined to one perspective.
I'll echo what Kelly said and also just say it's kind of obvious, but like the uniqueness of the degree. I think a lot of people have like psych degrees, data science degrees, and so when a potential employer or colleague meets with you and they're like, oh, haven't heard of a cognitive science major before, tell me what that was like. That can be a great conversation starter for you to pitch yourself as like an interdisciplinary thinker.
One thing that's been exciting for me is just seeing where the phrase words cognitive science pops up. So when I was registering for classes this spring, I saw that the Harvard Graduate School of Education had a class called the Cognitive Science of Learning and Teaching. And I was like, ooh, that's cool. And I almost cross-registered into it, but I didn't have room in my schedule. But that being said, it's like one of the highest rated courses in the School of Education. And I say that because I think different departments and just schools in general are really gravitating towards cognitive science and thinking about not just like its importance on its own as a standalone, but also how it's applying to all of these different fields. And I'll see it pop up in like articles that I'm reading for my class on negotiating across worldview differences, right? So that's just really cool. And I think that the further out you get, the more you'll see the words pop up because it's really more relevant to what's going on in the world now.
Yeah, and going off of that, I feel like it's really helped in the sense that because it's so interdisciplinary. I know we keep saying that, but that really is like one of the biggest perks that it's really easy to transition kind of like from one field or like one area to another, where like I started out in like artificial intelligence and research and that kind of thing, and then kind of went into the artificial intelligence of like training, and then I was like, oh, I like this training part, I think I'm going to go down the like education route, and now I'm working in like ed tech for K-12 education, so like because it's so interdisciplinary, you can kind of move through fields and you're not really constrained to like just data science or just computer science or just whatever.
Okay, so if we have everyone's answer for that question, then we're going to move on. So I know Lauren briefly mentioned this earlier, just talking about the whole experience that is shifting from a student to a person in the workplace. So we're just wondering, were there any surprises that occurred to you guys during the beginning of your career journey? We all have anxieties and nervousness about transitioning into the workforce after being a student for the past 16, sometimes plus years.
Yeah, so I just went through this. Graduation was like April 30th, May 1st, something like that. And then I started my full-time role May 15th or May 16th. I would recommend against doing that. Don't jump right in. Take as much of summer as you are able to. I think so. I would say don't be afraid at all about the workload. I think as students at Michigan and as people who've taken difficult courses, like of course every company is going to be different and every role is going to be different. But I've found that it's not like my day-to-day like actual tasks that are difficult. A lot of the stuff that has been more surprising or things I need to overcome had to do with like just learning like the ropes of a corporate job. Like that's not, there's a lot of stuff that just is not taught, or I guess can't really be taught. It has to be experienced. So just, navigating, like you're going to disagree with people you work with some of the time, or you're not going to get along with them, but they're your colleagues, and you like stuff like that. That is there's a period of adjustment there. So yeah, I would say that the most surprising thing wasn't like the actual work. It was more so just all of the other components that go into building a career or starting a career. That were most surprising. So I would say, yeah, don't worry as much about that's going to be hard.
Yeah, seconding that, my workload significantly decreased as soon as I got out of school. And obviously, like everybody's different, every company's different. But I remember like when you're in school, it's like there's this constant stress in the back of your head that like, oh, there's always something that you should be doing. There's that assignment that's coming up. There's this that's coming up. Like, and it never really feels like you can relax. Whereas like when you're working a 9 to 5, like it's 5 o'clock, like you're done for the day. You don't have to worry about anything work related until the next morning. And it's like, I don't know, the pace of my life, I feel like just slowed down a lot. And like you said, like it can be hard to like learn about the culture of the new company, and like every company does things differently. So trying to like understand how things work and how like, the pace of meetings and that kind of thing is takes some time to adjust to, but the actual workload itself definitely decreased when I was no longer in school.
Yeah, I completely agree. I would think I was most surprised by how empowering I found the 9 to 5. I didn't expect to be the person who loved the 9 to 5, but as soon as I left my academic job, I was like, oh my, I have an entire weekend to do whatever I want, and no one will email me, and I will email nobody. Like it's so good. So yeah, I think I just was most surprised by how empowering it can be.
Something that surprised me in the transition was the lack of like structured guidance, because when you're in college, people are asking you like, what's your major? When you graduate, you have advisors checking in with you. And once you get into your career, there's so much independence. It's fantastic, but it's also a little bit like threatening or scary if you're not used to it. And so I think it was a great opportunity for me to learn how to like trust my instinct and trust myself in career building, and also lean on the mentors that I met along the way.
And generally, Michigan students are pretty curious. We ask questions. On the whole, we don't really care if someone thinks we're dumb in class for asking questions, because we want to learn what the answer is. And that's going to serve you very well. Because if you are the person who's enthusiastic and asking questions and trying to figure out the best way to do things, you're going to be a very valuable employee and an asset to wherever you go.
All right, so moving on, kind of this is more geared towards those who are not in kind of industry or corporate positions, but are still in grad school or were in grad school. We're wondering if you could talk about kind of the reasons you had for going to grad school and like what drew you to kind of continue your academic career post Michigan.
I'm just going to keep repeating
start us off.
I'm curious and I like research. And those are good qualities to have if you're going to be doing research, because you need to be asking questions no one's asked before.
My immediate like post-grad years, I tried a couple different industry positions and nothing was a good fit. And so I decided to try a career that required a master's degree, and fortunately that was a good fit. But I also recommend like taking time to verify that you're committed enough, because grad school is a ton of work and money and time. And we already did undergrad. That's also work, money, and time.
Yeah, I took 5 years in between undergrad and grad school. I just started in the fall. I think I knew I was interested in going back to school like since the day I graduated Michigan. But I also wanted to gain some experience working. And I remember always thinking, I want to go back to school. I just don't know what in. And this idea of going to divinity school, which a lot of people haven't heard of. So if you ever want to connect or have questions about it later, you can email me. I had this idea and I was just sort of like, I tried on a bunch of different kinds of roles, and it just kept on like kind of calling to me that I wanted to go back and study now, which I'm concentrating in religion, ethics, and politics. So it's sort of like, we'll see what happens next, but I'm here now, and I'm really grateful I took the time in between. That worked really well for me, which I'm also happy to share more about with anyone who's curious.
And sort of building on Lauren's point, if you want to go to grad school and you're planning to go to grad school and you know that it's either going to cost you a lot of money or you're going to make poverty wages, please take some time off to make sure you want to do that, but also to get some savings if you can, because you can still live like you're a broke college student and put some money in the bank, and then it's a little easier to move places because you will need to move likely if you're going to grad school. And it gives you a bit of a safety net. So, you know, when everyone's struggling and living paycheck to paycheck, you have an emergency fund for when your car breaks down or you need to move suddenly or anything else that life throws at you.
I think I completely agree, and I think it just also just gives you more time to make sure that's really what you want to do. I knew I wanted to be a professor. I mean, I wrote my Michigan application about wanting to be a professor, and I was so certain. And then in the middle of being a lab manager after graduating undergrad, I realized it wasn't for me. And so for me, it really saved 5 years of doing grad school where I probably wouldn't have been as happy, given that 16-year-old Logan really was 100% certain he knew what he wanted to do. So be patient with yourself and get close to the things and kind of just explore if you can.
Yeah, and at the risk of repeating ourselves, I took 3 years off in between. It was a great decision. Do not regret it. And I always knew that I wanted to go back to school, mainly because in order to like really advance in like research, it's kind of required for you to have like a higher ed degree. I just didn't know what like subfield I wanted to go into. And my wake up call was actually, I was like talking to somebody and they were like, okay, well, like what things are you interested in? Like what things are you deciding between? And I started off talking about like education and learning sciences. I probably went on about it for like 20 minutes and just talking about how cool it was and how interesting it was. And then I was like, oh, and you know, like I'm also interested in like linguistics and like AI and other stuff. And they were like, I think you've already made your decision. I think it's education. I think that's what you want to do. And I was like, you know, I think you're right.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. I want to point out, I just love the way you all talk. Like I keep getting like smiles on my faces just like from listening to this. But that's all the questions that the peer facilitators have for right now. So we want to open the floor to questions from people in the audience or questions that you guys might have for each other. Oh yeah, Raquel, go for it.
Hi, I have a question for the people in grad school. So how would you say grad school is different than like being in grad school is different than like being in undergraduate school? And additionally, like for everyone that went to like when you go to grad school, what like is there a reason you chose to say do a master's program versus a PhD program?
So my program requires a successful defense of a master's thesis before progressing to the PhD. So that's just the way the program worked. In terms of choosing programs, I think pretty universal advice is going to be the PI, the researcher, the advisor you're working with. is the most important factor. Of course, you want to be in a place that's supportive and, that you can sort of build that dissertation committee or thesis committee at, and make sure you have more support than just your advisor, because research interests do change. But I mean, that's when I was looking for programs, that was my main, deciding factor. Do I feel like this is a good fit? Do I feel like this is someone who will support my research? And do we have a lot of research interest overlap? The first part of your question was the difference between grad school and undergrad, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Grad school, and especially if you're doing the PhD or a research focused graduate program, is very like self-structured, more or less self-paced. In undergrad, I don't know about you guys, but I took up to like 7 courses in one semester, which means you're just running from one end of campus to the other. You're always busy, you're always doing homework. And in grad school, a lot of the time they cap you at 9 or 12 credits. You aren't overloaded with work because you're expected to be doing your own research. You're expected to be self-motivated in many ways and sort of figuring out your own path. It's not something where, oh, for this major, you need to take these 35 credits and get good grades, and, everyone will sign off and then you graduate. You're expected to contribute new knowledge to the field and formulate research questions and figure out how to answer them. So I know a lot of people have difficulty if they don't have a strong research background, if they haven't been trained to think like that. I will say my Michigan education definitely prepared me very well. So I would not expect many people in the Zoom call to have that sort of trouble. But yeah, a lot of it is on you. You're not checking in constantly with advisors. You have a lot more freedom, and that can be kind of devastating to people if they don't know what to do with that, and if they've had a really structured experience before that.
Yeah, I'll say as far as the decision between master's and PhD, while I did know that I wanted to do research, I wasn't necessarily interested in like going into academia. So the master's made more sense for that. And also like the master's was a lot shorter. It was only a 1-year program instead of a 4-year program, or, as many years as it takes program. So it felt like a little bit less of a commitment in case, like I said, I'd already changed fields like a few times. I was like, who knows, maybe I'll change my mind again. I don't want to spend 4 years going down this rabbit hole if it's not for me. As far as the difference between undergrad and grad school, I think this might just be the program that I did, but I found that there was a lot more group work. There's a lot more collaborative work involved. I counted, and in my first 2 semesters in grad school, I was in 18 group projects. So it just felt like more of a tight community because my program was a little bit smaller. It was only about 30 people, whereas like Michigan, is huge. And I don't I'm also in class of 2018, and I couldn't name like anybody else who was in the cog sci major in 2018, but I can name like everybody who was in my master's program. So those are probably the 2 biggest differences.
Yeah, I think it totally depends where you go and what you're studying. For me, lots of reading in grad school, like so much reading. And that's not to say that there wasn't a ton of reading in undergrad too, because there was, but I, transitioned back, especially like going back to school after working, like you're not used to reading that much academic work. So in such a short amount of time. So the biggest transition was getting used to that workload, especially because some weeks it's like not even humanly possible to read all that's assigned. That is also in my program, which is in the humanities, and there's just these texts that they assign can be much longer than, say, like a published science article in a journal. So there's that. I think generally speaking, though, I love being a grad student, and having full brain development. So like once you're, post age 26 and you're used to taking care of yourself on your own, and when you need to like eat and sleep and prioritize different things that maybe you're not prioritizing in undergrad, or maybe that was just me because things are busy and it feels like there's so much going on. As a grad student, I feel like I have a much better handle on balancing those different things, knowing when to say no, and not feeling the need to be involved in everything. Really only saying yes to the things that I want to do, because my time here is limited and life is too short to do things you don't want to do. Oh, and one more thing, sorry. I'm also in a program that requires a master's before PhD, to answer your second question. And it would be a huge commitment to say I'm gonna commit the rest of my life to this work without dipping my toe in the water a little bit more. So I think that there's a lot of value to going back to school for the sake of learning and getting that information gathering before committing yourself to a lifetime of academia, because you have to really, really love your research question.
Awesome. Thank you. Do we have any more questions? Also, for those that came in late, there will be a recording sent out of this.
I just want to add on one thing before we wrap things up. Some master programs, you can get them funded if you have like a graduate assistantship or a graduate research assistantship. So if you're interested in doing an MA versus a PhD, that's something to look for when you're applying to schools.
Yeah, independent studies are also really common for at least getting some kind of income while you're there and like offsetting that cost a little bit.
And when we talk about funding, a lot of the time, we're not just talking about, having tuition covered. You get an actual living stipend. I mean, living is kind of an oxymoron there, but you get a stipend that can hopefully cover rent with a roommate and maybe some food. But you also get all of your breathing stipend. You also get your tuition fully covered, and usually there's a lower cost like health insurance. So those are all things to consider if you're looking at different programs. And reach out to current students. They will be honest with you. They really have nothing to gain by lying to you. So please reach out. Everyone, whether they're in the Zoom or not, everyone's always happy to respond to prospective students.
Raquel, did you have another question?
Yeah, I have a question for Tyree. I'm curious about the program that you went through at Carnegie Mellon. Because it sort of I'd say that intersects a lot of with a lot of things that I'm interested in doing, like that sort of like my career goals. So what sorts of what sorts of things do you learn about in the program, or how would you say like it helped you reach reach the sort of path that you're on now?
Sure. I don't want to take the floor for too long because other people have things, but yeah, so the program that I went into is very industry focused. So rather than doing a master's thesis, we have a capstone project where we are put in a group and then we're partnered with an industry partner, and we do like a 8-month long basically contract for work for them where they tell us what they want to do, and we spend months researching and developing it and delivering them a product at the end. So that was really, really valuable. Main things we learn about are state-of-the-art learning sciences principles, how to design online education in an effective way to promote learning and belonging and motivation and all of these kinds of things, the most recent research in those fields. And aside from that, you can really go down whatever rabbit hole you wanted. This program was also very interdisciplinary, just like the undergrad at U of M, in that it's a collection of cognitive science, learning sciences type things, user experience design, and computer science. So they make sure that there's an equal amount of people from each of those disciplines in the program so that you can really collaborate across all those disciplines throughout the program. But yeah, if you want to know more about it, I can talk about it for hours. So you can email me and we can set something up if you really are interested.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
Sure, I'll put my email in the chat.
Do we have any other questions from people in the audience? Any other follow-up questions that people want to ask? Oh, Sally.
Hello, my name's Sally. I'm a rising senior graduating in December, and I wanted to ask about for pretty much any of the panelists how your U of M network or CogSci alumni network has helped you succeed like in your career professionally, like if you learned about any new experiences or even got your current job from like a network from U of M. That would be really great to hear from.
Yeah, I've got. Sorry to.
Oh no, I just say this is directed to everyone, so not just like a specific track, but I am on the decision track, so.
Nice. I was on the decision track too. I've had 3 jobs since graduating, and all of them have been through the Michigan network in some way. And I think it tends to like snowball too, where like your Michigan network, like someone may recommend that you speak to someone else, like who maybe also went to Michigan or maybe not. This is cheesy coming from the person that works at LinkedIn, but I've honestly had a lot of luck, like sliding into LinkedIn DMs, like even putting Go Blue in the little like subject line. I think everyone loves to help out other people that went to Michigan, so don't underestimate that. And even like sharing a little bit about like what dorm you lived in your freshman year, or like I found that like really talking about the Michigan connection helped like get other people excited to, you know, meet me and like tell me about their job experience. So, I mean, I think everyone that went to Michigan is quite friendly and eager to help. And I'm sure others have had similar experiences.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions from audience? If not, we can wrap things up here.
This is just, I know I'm a senior, but I just wanted to answer that question as well. Like from last year's cognitive science alumni panel, I actually reached out and spoke with Logan about his journey, you know, thinking he was going to be a lab manager and then transitioning into other career fields, and like how he navigated that kind of shift both in mindset and in career and, you know, day-to-day work and like regaining your weekends and all that kind of stuff. So like you can start the alumni reach out while you're still a student. Like this is an amazing opportunity, like this kind of panel, for us to meet alumni that have had similar experiences to us. So I think, you know, just coming here and being here and showing your face and, you know, meeting the people is another great way to expand the network, even though we haven't graduated yet.
The other one I want to mention, we've mentioned Handshake and LinkedIn. There's also UCAN, the University Career Alumni Network. I get messages from there. I look back on my messages and I had messages to people from 4 years ago. No one responded to half of them, but I did get responses to half of them, if you want to look at it optimistically. But I learned a lot. I didn't know my current job existed until I chatted with one of those people. I thought I wanted to go in some other field, and I chatted with someone and they're like, I think you're talking about this. And so I learned that user experience research is a thing, which I really enjoy. So go when they're open-minded and just have a good conversation.
And outside of like the alumni network, again, Michigan is a unique place. You're around world experts in anything you could imagine, whether they're the graduate students, the faculty, you know, everyone at Michigan is absolutely the top of their field, the best you're going to find. And I feel like as a student, I didn't realize how rare that was until, you know, I'd offhandedly mention, oh yeah, I took a seminar my sophomore year with this person, and people would freak out like, what are you talking about? I've been studying his work for 30 years. And so you have access to so much more than you realize. which is really cool if you're going into fields where, you know, people are going to know their names.
I'll say that some of my classmates got some really cool jobs directly related to cognitive science or like specifically decision and cognition. So I'm happy to put you in touch with some of the classmates that I've kept in touch with. And then of course, happy to speak with anyone who wants to stay in touch.
Yeah, no, thank you guys. That was super helpful. And also thanks for taking the time to join this panel tonight.